Welcome everybody to already February. Although outside it doesn't look like February, it looks like March or April. But anyways, so welcome to the February monthly meeting. And so we changed the the agenda a bit over the last. We originally had a slightly different agenda, but we are actually reversing things a bit. So I'll talk about past and future events when we start. Then we'll talk about an update on the EV Everywhere pilot with Hydro Ottawa. And then after that, Daryl will talk about home batteries. And then Jeff, which is right there, he's going to talk about his home solar setup. And then Mike is going to do news and roundtable. So I think we have a pretty packed agenda. So let's go and look at past events. So again, this month we did a bunch of kilowatts and coffee. And we went from east-west every week, and we're going to change that this coming month. So here, I think it's so our next meeting will be here on the 25th. So kilowatts and coffee here, we have more of a variety of different locations. So these are already posted on our website. They're also posted on ADX website for people who would go there to look for events. Okay, future events, I've got a big list here. I'll talk about the top part. The rest, I've got some individual slides for them. So there's some of these are past, but and there's stuff that I've been doing and stuff that other people are doing. So there's an EV speaker symposium on the 28th. That's during the day. We talked about it before. I'm going there. Art Hunter will be going there. Craig was supposed to come, but he can't anymore. The one thing I want to mention here is on March 4th, there's going to be a workshop in West Carleton, and the workshop is on BESS, so that's battery electric storage systems. And if you follow the news in West Carleton in particular, there's a lot of public opposition to these devices. Okay, so what these are, they're large battery systems, and actually, if you want to see one, go to IKEA. Beside where the chargers are for the trucks, there's one there. There's a Tesla BESS there. Yeah. Just one, right? So that's about 4 megawatt, I think, of capacity, something like that. So that gives you an idea what they look like, right? But some people have spread some FUD saying that these things, they'll catch fire and they'll leak all sorts of nasty stuff and all that. So there's public opposition. A bunch of us got together. We're working with the local councillor, what's his name, Clark Kelly, and we're doing a workshop on the next Monday, 7 to 9 in West Carleton. So if you're interested in that, there's you can sign up through what's the Eventbrite. I don't have the link here, but you can sign up through Eventbrite. If you're interested, you can't find the link, let me know, and I'll give it to you. But what we're looking for is some people who will be on the supportive side of this thing that will help us convince the locals that these things are dangerous. Okay, so when this first happened and I saw the opposition, I was flabbergasted. Right? I mean, these things, they're the same batteries we have in cars, right? And actually, the best systems today are using LFP batteries, which are much safer than the batteries we've had in our cars for a long time now, right? So anyways, that's what's happening there. So Beatrice Desloges, I went there to help them prepare for an EV debate. That will be interesting. So it's a high school, French high school. They're doing a debate where there's going to be 3 groups. There'll be a pro-EV group, there'll be an anti-EV group, and there'll be consumers in between that are going to be asking questions and deciding at the end whether they want an EV or a gas car. Okay. The actual debate is next week on the 6th. There's an event on April 11th, Women in EVs, and Kristen and Jessica will be helping with that one, and Mike potentially, right? So
sure.
But anyway, so that's, just wanted to mention it there. But let's go through the other events. So April 20th, we have Earth Fest at Carleton Place, and we did that last year. We had a static display last year, and I did a presentation from memory. There was no projector or anything, so I just went through all the stuff about mist and all that. It'll be similar to that, the presentation part this year, but we'll have test drives. Okay? We still have to figure out the exact logistics there.
Terry has a question.
Yes, Terry?
Yeah, sorry, I did
I'm not able to get a steady stream. You're cutting out every 20 seconds or so for about 6 seconds. I'm just wondering if I'm the only one feeling that or others.
You guys see it there? It's
It's fine here.
So it seems okay over here, so it's probably your end. Okay, so, okay. Anyways, the potion there's the wrong one. That's the one from last year. But it's the same location, all that, right? So this year we'll have test drives. What I've done is the reservation volunteering spreadsheet. I actually put these events that I'm gonna talk about in there. So if you wanna go and put your name there, you can right now. There's still a few things I need to do to polish it up. But they're in there in the volunteer spreadsheet. So next one is May 5th. So this is the North Grenville Sustainability Fair. Again, that's an old poster, so 2022 one. They don't seem to have one for 2024 yet. So this is, you know, we've been at this thing for many, many years. So they have something inside, like an EV display inside the arena. They've got a whole bunch of other sustainable stuff in another part of the building. We'll be doing one presentation there, and well, someone.
I will be doing the
Yeah,
presentation.
because I won't be there at this point.
It'll be me.
I'll be traveling. So yeah, so it's a good event. We're gonna have some test drives, and we already have commitments from a few dealers to provide vehicles for test drives. You may remember last year, if you were there, that our friends from Byron and Ford, they brought 2 vehicles, and essentially they just about threw the keys to someone to say, hey, there you go. Didn't check any ID or anything. And
And it sounds like you're gonna do the same thing this year.
and that's fine with me, right? So okay, that's fine. So yeah, so it should be fun, but we'll continue to plan that. We'll continue to talk as we go. So on May 16th, this is a Thursday night, okay? So OREC is doing something with Patagonia. They're on York Street, I believe. So we're close to here. And they've asked us if you want to participate also. So we'll have a table. We'll have just a few people. We don't have many people. But if you're interested, and I will be there at that time, so if you're interested, you could sign up for it. Then this one was supposed to be May 18th, but Climate Network Landmark, they decided that they want to do something a bit more elaborate with us. Not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but they're developing a program over 7 months where they're going to be doing a whole bunch of different things. And we're still waiting for confirmation of exactly when we're going to do something with them. This will be in Perth, okay, which is kind of nice because there's some events that are outside of our normal territory, right? Which is great because we're reaching out further out, right? So anyways, we'll have more details as we get closer. Blackburn Fun Fair again this year, so it's May 31st, June 2nd. And that should be interesting again, like it is usually. Then July 20th in Westport, so again, another event that's far from downtown Ottawa anyways. There's a Westport car show. And we're gonna be doing some test drives and other stuff there, okay? So more to come on that as we get closer to the event. So you want to talk about the EV Everywhere update? You're on mute, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's okay. Good.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just go with this quite quickly. But before I start, some exciting news. I'm actually at Tremblant right now, and my Tesla was dwarfed by a Rivian pickup truck today on the charger, which was pretty cool to see. The first time that I was really right beside a Rivian. It was an American license plate, so I'm not sure if they're available here in Canada yet, but pretty cool car. Anyway, so quick update on the EV Everywhere. I guess a little bit of context. You may have all heard about the EV Everywhere project Blue Wave AI is doing in collaboration with Hydro Ottawa. Essentially, the project is about allowing companies like Hydro Ottawa to control charging of your car when there is a load peak in your local loop. And in order to do this, there's a smartphone app, which some of you I know have installed already. And you can link your car into your app. And by doing this, you essentially allow Blue Wave, in behalf of our Hydro Ottawa, to pause and resume charging when there is a so-called demand response event coming from Hydro Ottawa. So demand response events are kind of signals coming from utility companies to subscribe users to reduce the power consumption to essentially avoid a power surge in a local loop. Okay, so we have the app out there. Most of you have probably seen it and tried to link your car. We are using a company which is called Smart Car to connect your car to our app, and we have received quite a few complaints from your early testers. Your car not being compatible, you are not able to link it. So, but we need to find a way to reach as many brands and models as possible. So that's why Blue Wave tried to evaluate another company, which is called eNote. It's a Norwegian company, and they are exclusively focused on electric vehicles, on any kind of electrical assets like HVAC systems and batteries and solar inverters. They're pretty cool. They've been around for 5 years, and they're expanding in the North American market right now. So they're claiming a lot of good things, but as we have learned from Smart Car, these claims are not always valid, right? So we need to do a survey and figure out which models and brands of EVs are supported by both systems to make a decision as a company if we switch over to eNote or Smart Car. So there is a survey. Hopefully Craig can help me to send out an official invite after the meeting, where we would like you to and essentially use both systems, Smart Car and eNote, to connect your car, follow the instructions of the two companies. They are very similar. You have to log into your account, grant permissions, and say allow, and then you will get a response screen saying, your brand model year was successfully connected. So then we will collect the brands and models and the years of the different vehicles for the different companies and try to compare which one performs better. So we have a few slides here, just quick. Raymond, if you can just go through it, just 5 seconds each, so that you see the process. So step 2 would be essentially you click on either Smart Car or eNote, you get a little pop-up, make sure the pop-up is supported. I couldn't do it another way. So you click on continue. Next slide, please. And then you select your brand. In this case would be a Tesla. Then you continue. Next slide. Then you have to sign into your account, whoever company you are associated with, your brand. Next slide. Then you say allow permissions. And again, this is really, we're not doing anything to your car. We're just trying to see if we can make it through the process. And if we would be able, if you would use that information to access your car. So next slide, please. And then you would see something like this. Your vehicle was successfully connected to Smart Car or eNote. And we'd like you to do both. So now if you have an issue and in the process, if something doesn't work or your car is not supported, there is a feedback. Next slide, and that's the last one. There is a feedback form at the bottom, and we would like you to actually, give a little feedback of what you experienced, your brand model, because we wouldn't be able to record it and submit it. And we will collect all that information, and then we'll figure out as a company if we stick with Smart Car, if we switch over to eNote. Again, your help is greatly appreciated, and I hope we will find something out after that survey. Okay, that's it.
So just a couple of questions here. When we got people to participate in the pilot, we selected people based on the car they had and all that, right? So do you want everybody that has an EV to try?
Everyone should try. There is actually you can see it on the slide. There is a compatible vehicle, an EV list. And on the eNote side, it's pretty large. They have all the brands and models and years. We would actually invite everyone to give it a shot. For some reason, because there are always subtle differences between the United States and Canada. And anode is not really aware of those differences in smart car neither. So let's say if you have an ID4 in Canada, it might be different than if it would be registered in the United States. And we would like everyone who has an EV to try it and record their feedback here.
Okay, cool. Any other question? Yes?
You're only wanting people who have Hydro Ottawa accounts, so people who are in Hydro
No.
One. Do you want us to at least do this part for you, or
Everyone. I mean, the more different brands and models we can confirm by this survey, the better it is, because then we know what works and what doesn't. Right now, we are relying on what the companies are claiming, and we know that it's not always true, in particular if it comes to Canada. So everyone, no matter if you're with Hydro Ottawa, Hydro Quebec, you know, it's really just figuring out which EVs work in Canada and which one doesn't, which ones don't.
Any other questions? So for those, we didn't give that much context there, so let's give a bit of context, but this is demand management at this point, right? So like Les said, this is to be able to control when your car charges. Eventually, this type of system will be used to do a lot more than that. V2G in particular will be supported by this type of system. So getting this type of thing out there and having Hydro Ottawa get some experience with it is a good thing, because it's bringing us closer to doing some of these things that we'll need to do in the future if we want to be able to deploy heat pumps and EVs and other electrified stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Raymond, for clarifying that.
You're welcome. Okay, no other questions? Okay, so let's go to the next one. And okay, so this is Daryl. So Daryl, do you want to chime up? Put on your first slide.
I'll try not to read the slides. I assume you guys can all see the screen reasonably well. And I will just point out that what I'm doing is based on my research, and I haven't reviewed this with OREC or EVCO, and I do hope to present this to OREC at some point in a slightly different version. So that's the feedback to start off with. Next, please. This is smaller print than I remember in my deck, so is everyone okay with reading this?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good. It's fine.
Okay. So basically, I'm just going to give you a little background on what the ultra low overnight electricity rate is about. I do know that there is some confusion from people I've been talking to, so but it's relatively new, especially for people in the Ottawa area. So I just wanted to, again, clarify that ULO is not about promoting conservation, and it's not about promoting renewables. It's not about promoting electric vehicles, though I have seen messaging that suggests that. And that's because Hydro Ottawa and Hydro One can't tell whether it's an EV on the other end of the meter or not. So it's not about saving money for ratepayers, because the penalty rate in the afternoons is going to really make this not very attractive for a lot of people. And I have had a couple of conversations with people who have told me they agree with me that this government is not really good at understanding policy and math. So we'll see how things go. So I've been kind of at the electricity thing for rather a long time now. So not quite back to when Pickering went live, but not long after that. I had something to do with the nuclear industry. And so I know quite a bit about those. And basically the issue we have is that Ontario built way too much nuclear at one point. We'll talk more about that in further slides. We do know now that renewables are less expensive than nuclear to build and to operate, especially because the fuel is free. But an issue that we do have right now is that this government, in my opinion, has missed the boat for the last 6 years on trying to keep the grid current. And the solution they've come up with now is what I call the Enbridge subsidy. So I've taken this slide from the IESO website last fall, and what I want to point out is that when you look at those numbers, I don't know if that doesn't do anything for you guys, right? I can play on my own screen, but you're not going to see it. So anyway, basically what I want you to see here is that the nuclear component is the biggest one by a margin. And that is, about running base load according to the province of Ontario. But what's happened is that we've allowed our nuclear fleet to degrade over the years, and now what we're doing is we're running a lot of natural gas even to generate base load.
Yeah, sorry, before we go to the next slide, I just want to point out, this is the production capacity. It's not the sources that we have in a typical day, right?
See, ISO says this is the capacity, and for nuclear, that means that's what should be online.
Yeah. But what I mean is, if you look at the gas and the hydro, it seems fairly big, but on a typical day, the nuclear fleet is going full pin. The ones that are operating full pin, and then they're adding other parts, right? And the gas.
Exactly. Yes, that's true. This is nameplate. This is not actual production.
Cool.
So if you want actual production, you can go to places like GridWatch, and I might spend too much time watching this site. It's possible.
Same.
I may have a problem. Anyway, but what I want you to look at is that although the nameplate capacity according to IESO is 13 gigawatts, what they're actually producing at this, and when I did this slide, was 9.6 gigawatts. And then you can see where the natural gas piece is actually significant, and years ago it wasn't. So this has changed. What is also changing is that we're actually seeing wind being allowed to come onto the grid. And as recently as 10 years ago, wind was curtailed. We wouldn't let it on the grid. So that's also a big change. So we talk about what base load is, because that's what the nuclear fleet was supposed to be about. And what we see here is that base load last September was actually at 11.5 gigawatts. So if we had 13 gigawatts of nuclear operating, we have already got more nuclear, and we wouldn't need anything else to meet base load. But what's happened is that a lot of our reactors are actually not operational right now. We're doing rebuilds. Some of them are just completely dead and will never be operational again. And at the moment of the fleet that is supposed to be operating, 5 of the reactors are offline for extended periods of time. So what we have now is that we're having to go to all the renewables we can get, and we're setting aside a lot of space now for the natural gas and anything else we can get, because we really need that electricity to keep the grid stable. So first commercial. Who am I to be talking about all this stuff? I know something about electric vehicles. I know something about the energy industry in general. I wrote a book on energy, did fairly well. I was actually basically an EVCO member before there was EVCO, so I'm actually one of the reasons there is EVCO. I did my first solar electric boat in 1999, my first car in 1979. I've done some household solar thermal, and anyway, just some general stuff that I think gives me a little bit of credibility to talk about the energy sector in Ontario. Next slide.
So Daryl, I talk about your EVs very often, and I tell people that you are still today just using 120 volt to charge 2 EVs, okay?
That is correct. Well, 2 or 4, depending on the day.
Okay.
Yeah, so anyway, I wanted to get you some current data. So this slide comes from the IESO. This is their daily graph of the peaks and troughs. And this one's fairly recent, so February 22nd, this is a weekday, and the trough went down to 13.8 gigawatts. So given that this is the time when we should be doing heating, and that uses electricity for blowers and resistance heating and heat pumps, that's not a big number in the winter for Ontario. So also ignore the blue line, because that is not what the mandate is for the electrical industry in Ontario. That's for selling to other places, and we make some revenue off of that, but probably not enough to really justify what we do with it. So the IESO has referred to the rate plans in Ontario as being simple. I disagree. I have gone through their charts. I find them difficult to decipher. And so I drew up something of my own because I actually think this is simpler to understand than what they have put out. And believe it or not, yeah, this is simpler. So this is the time of use rates for weekdays and weekends in summer and winter, because it's simple to have 4. And then we talk about the ULO rates at the bottom, where we just have the 2 sets. We have the weekday and weekend rates because there is no summer winter version of the ultra low overnight. The reason for the colors and the chart and the bar charts is basically just give you the idea of what the 24-hour day looks like, and to see what the actual rate, variable rate per kilowatt hour is for each hour, which is the granularity for making the changes. And in the bottom 2 lines, I'll just point out the purple highlighting is about the high rates from 4 till 9 in the afternoon and evening. And the light blue is the 2.8 cents, which is the actual ULO rate. So what I did was to try to give you some sense of how this pans out in terms of the actual rates, is I took I modeled a load of 1 kilowatt constant across the 24 hours for the day, and then came up with the amounts that costs over the period of a month. And over the month is about the fact that under the tiered rates, the 3 tiered rates, you don't have hourly rates. So at the month is the first place where I can actually do some kind of reasonably even comparison. The catch is with the tiered rates, this looks like a really good deal by comparison, but it's only good for either 600 or 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, and after that the rate goes up. So it's not quite as attractive if you get into the numbers that most of us are actually using. And I'm just pointing out here the difference between that 2.8 cents and 28.6 cents, and that's a 90% discount if you can figure out how to move your electricity consumption from the highest time to the lowest time, and that's weekdays. So I just wanted to map these out for you. The 2 green lines are the actual demand, average demand, approximately. And what you'll see is the dark green line is the summer rate. So you see more of that load for air conditioning through the afternoon, and you see a trough in the lighter green line, which is the winter line. And the winter line stays a little higher at night because that's presumably the heating load. And then I wanted to show you the 2 rate plans. That basically reflects what I showed you in the earlier bar chart layout. But the thing I want to point out here, so that orange line, has that nice jump at the top that really gets your attention. So you understand what the 28.6 cents is. But if we can press advance once, I think something pops up here. There we go. This is where the high demand actually is. And what I'm pointing out is that it doesn't really line up very well with where the highest prices are. So if the economic policy is about shifting demand to get us off the high point of the demand curve, we're not really lined up very well. So then I started thinking, what if we could actually move our load around a bit? So, and then try to use more of the cheap stuff and less of the expensive stuff. And I did some math, and basically that 1 kilowatt hour load, if I could move that 5 hours worth out of the high zone and into the low zone, what would my savings be? And we have the weekday rates and the weekend rates, and when I put them together, my conclusion was it's about $30 a month. That's a potential saving here at just 1 kilowatt hour constant load, if you can move that stuff. At $360 a month, and given that most of us use more than an average of 1 kilowatt hour constantly, I think that maybe we should look into that a little bit. And, oh, okay. Thought this came later. Anyway, again, this is more just some of the things that I do. If these topics interest you, please feel free to get in touch with me and we can talk about it further. And my contact information is on the last slide. Next slide.
Before we go there, The Emperor's New Hydrogen Economy is a book that Daryl wrote in 2006.
Published in 2006, wrote from 2001 until 2005, yeah.
Okay. So it's actually available on Amazon. I checked recently. So, and I have a copy. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Good book about it. It holds up. It holds up, yeah.
Yeah, it's held up really well. I've had actually a couple of approaches to update it and republish, and I just basically said, no, it's still frighteningly current, so let's not. Yeah, things just have not changed enough. Sorry. So what we're after here is load shifting, and I want to be specific about some terminology. So load shifting is not the same as peak shaving. They're two different terms, and we'll talk about both. So load shifting is just that. It's shifting when the load happens during the course of the day. And I looked at what we could probably switch over. So we did the dishwasher right off the bat because that was easy because it has a start delay feature. Our electric clothes dryer is vintage, so it does not have an auto delay feature on it. And our household has trouble staying up till 11 o'clock at night. We have some battery powered tools. I haven't gone to the trouble of actually doing this yet. I had done the indoor garden in past years when we were on time of use rates. It did make a small difference. But our big items are the 2 electric cars and the 2 electric tractors. So yeah, this is very much about our household because that was data I had easy access to. And we signed up for the ULO rate as early as we could, which allowed us to actually start on November the 27th, given our billing period. So I'm just going to tell you about the actual numbers that we generated based on our bills of the average price we paid per kilowatt hour. And I will tell you that this metric is not perfect because there is a fixed component in your hydro bill as well as a variable rate that goes with the kilowatt hours. So, but it's not bad. It's not a terrible indicator. So in November, basically we were on time of use. So that was our base load number at 16 cents a kilowatt hour. In December, we tried the tiny little load shifts and we got down to about 14 cents. And in January, the second EV was getting more use. My son had been out of town for December, and we tried the little peak shaving experiment. So what the peak shaving experiment was that we did was we took one of our freezers and we put it on an inverter, and then we hooked the inverter up to a couple of lead acid batteries that I have here. They're basically trolling motor batteries and weren't doing anything for the winter anyway. Though this winter, maybe I could have kept the boat out. I don't know. Anyhow, and what the conclude, actually, I think we can go to the next slide and I'll talk about that. So the freezer that we were using is pretty efficient. So it was probably using about 60 watts on a fairly continuous basis over time. Compressor cycles on and off, obviously, but we had a power meter on it. For those of you who haven't seen this, this is Hydro Ottawa's dashboard for if you go into my account and you want to see what your electricity usage was for a given point in time. So this is a weekday in January. This is when we were on the ULO rates. And what I'm showing you here is that, so this goes midnight to midnight going across. The light blue bars are the ULO rate. The yellow bars are the midday rates. The dark purple is the penalty rate, the peak rate for the ULO weekdays. And what this is showing, I hope, is that we did a reasonably good job. Our EVs are charging, overnight, and that's basically that 3.5 kilowatt load until it tapers down a little bit. The little bit of high first yellow bar is probably late getting up, making a pot of coffee, and putting some toast on, because our base rate is about 600 watts. So things like a big coffee maker and a toaster actually are visible in terms of being changes in the load. The bar for 4 o'clock, so that's 3 to 4 o'clock, that would be me doing some dinner prep that day before the rate went up. The one for 6 o'clock is actually getting dinner finished off and served. So those are the kinds of things you can see if you kind of know what your daily cycle is about. The data was a bit of an issue in the first couple of months. Basically, when the month finished, billing period finished, the data, the hourly data disappeared for the month until it was time for the billing to be printed, and then that data reappeared again. So that made this more of a challenge than it should have been. My speculation is that Hydro Ottawa hadn't actually gotten this implemented correctly in their billing system. And I raised that with them. Their response was they were aware of the problem, but they had no fixed date. But as I was checking, one last time before getting ready to do this presentation, I noticed that they seem to have resolved that problem, but they never notified me. So anyway, so having gone through the peak shaving experiment, I'm not going to bore you with the numbers. They were odd. But basically what we found out is that, yes, there was a small difference in the shifting in terms of what we probably were paying on our bill. But it's not worth the effort. I mean, I was doing it because basically the batteries were sitting here doing nothing with storage, and I have access to battery chargers. So it was just me spending time to get this set up, but we didn't see a real win. Part of that could be because there is a loss involved in charging batteries and then using the inverter to get the power back out again. So on load shifting, though, we definitely saw that there were cost savings to be had, and that's about effort and discipline, and it doesn't really have any setup cost. And now I want to start heading into the conclusions, and let's start talking about some other things that we can be thinking about going ahead. So heat pumps. I'm assuming air source heat pumps, so there will be a difference in the coefficient of performance from colder times to warmer times. And I suspect what that means is that with the ULO price at night, when the heat pump is running, that will probably win financially. But the offset is in the summer. If your heat pump is running as an air conditioner, unless you're doing some careful programming about temperature control, it's quite possible you'll end up spending more using that heat pump. Anyway, open for debate. I haven't done it. We'll find out. But, okay, there we go. So a whole house battery. I think this probably has some potential in terms of what is going to look like load shifting from the utilities point of view. But there are some caveats in terms of making sure that you have an inverter that can handle your entire house load, plus a heat pump, whatever else you might be doing. My guess, based on some numbers I ran, I did a couple of scenarios trying to figure out how this would work, but this is the one that I'm presenting right now, which is if you spend 8 hours a day charging at the ULO rate overnight, and you're basically getting 16 kilowatt hours stored in order to run the air conditioning primarily off that battery storage, then I think you can probably save about $4 a day during the cooling season. But I don't know how it is for other people around here, but my cooling season is about 3 weeks a year. So that's not going to work for me, but other people who I know may be out and getting a lot more solar gain, maybe that's more interesting for them. During the periods where you're not running air conditioning and you're not running heating, it's not going to make any difference.
Daryl, one thing about the air source heat pump, I was looking at the specs on mine. I have a Zuba.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when it's in air conditioning mode, it uses a lot less energy than when it's in heat mode in the winter. So like in the winter, it's most likely to draw the most energy, right, overnight, as you said.
Right.
And we're talking like as a heat pump, it's like something like 2.5 kilowatts when it's running, and then the backup heat could run up to 15 kilowatts.
Right.
But in the summer, as an air conditioner, the maximum draw is like 1.5 kilowatts, right? So it's significantly it's significantly less draw when it's in AC mode. So I think even if you're running it on heat, it won't be as big a hit as it would be in the winter, right?
All right.
That's mine when I looked it up. So
Yeah,
just
I mean,
promise.
I suspect that there's something, because the delta T is likely a lot smaller about the
Yes.
cooling.
Yeah,
Than
it's
it is on
exactly.
heating, that's probably what that's about.
Yep.
But
Yeah, so
I
it's not
haven't
like,
had a chance to experience it yet, so.
yeah, I just wanted to make the point that it's not apples to apples when you're comparing winter to summer with a heat pump, because in the summer it uses less energy overall than it would in the winter, regardless of the time of day, right? So,
Oh, that's a good point. Thanks. Okay, so when we started talking about whole house battery, something else that was mentioned to me was the potential for using your EV as your whole house battery. I mean, I know it can be done. I think there are some caveats there. They're not trying to, a whole house battery and your EV are probably not trying to do the same job. The whole house battery is going to be designed to do exactly what it's supposed to do, which is supply power for the household. The EV is not designed to do that, at least not any of the ones I'm experienced with yet. I don't know of anybody who actually has a true bi-directional charger available for household use at this point. And I don't know of any vehicles that come stock with vehicle to house capability. Vehicle to load, definitely, but not vehicle to house as a stock item, as far as I know.
stay tuned for the news and you'll find out.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually,
Fair
the Lightning has, you could buy a kit.
A kit,
that
yeah,
has
it's
it,
expensive.
But it's very expensive.
Alan had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask a little bit about shifting thermal loads. So, I mean, yes, the ground source heat pump, I'm looking at putting a 240 volt timer on my ground source heat pump to avoid the peak rates. I'm also looking at the same thing for the hot water tank.
Mhm.
So the hot water tank, I mean, typical, 50 gallon or 60 gallon, whatever it is, tank. I mean, that should be plenty of hot water for the evening activity. As long as telling you you don't have your shower until after 9 or even ideally after 11 or in the morning, but 7. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking at. So I bought a 240 volt timer that I'm just gonna put the hot water tank on.
Okay.
And I still gotta, I think for the ground source heat pump, I'll probably look at a smart thermostat of some sort, just to, go up a degree or down a degree to manage the heat a bit, and maybe preheat or pre-cool prior to the peaks.
Yes.
If possible, I don't want to kick in the electrical heater unless necessary. But I was thinking, even at that ultra low rate, even if I had to kick in the electrical heater to catch up, that wouldn't be bad at all. Compared to the 10 times difference. So.
Okay. I'm doing some work with some people who are trying to do something around efficient housing right now. And one of the things that we found is there's a company in Nova Scotia who actually does a phase change material for thermal storage for household use. So that might be worth looking at as well.
Yeah, that and also just thermal mass, right?
Thermal mass, yeah, absolutely.
Have lots of stones and stuff in your house to help maintain the
For the
temperature.
phase change, there's a lot of
that's
energy
cool.
required
That's
for
huge.
phase change, right? So one thing I wanted to point out is I have a Rheem air source water heater. And I heat the water to 140 at night, and then I either turn it completely off or heat it to less.
So does your water heater have like a time of?
No, I've got an app. I've got an app.
Oh,
that
that's
controls it.
sorry.
So I just bought something called a Quanta. We can talk about this in the round table after, but I just bought a water heater timer thing. It's a smart thing it's basically a Nest, but for your water tank. So we can talk about it in the round table.
Nice.
Cool.
Okay.
I have a quick question or comment.
Sure.
So for a lot of these things where we're talking about heating and cooling, like your freezer, your water heater, if you just turn them off during peak.
Yeah.
The thermal mass of your hot water tank will keep your hot water hot enough. Your freezer, I'm not sure, but you
It should
should
be,
probably
yeah,
just
yeah.
unplug it.
The chest freezer, you can put a smart wall thing on it and just shut it off.
Since you have thermal mass built in, just use the thermal mass that's there. So that was fine.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So what I'm looking forward to eventually is the equivalent of the octo valve for a house So the octal valve in a Tesla takes heat and cool and moves it where it's needed depending on the condition, right? And it mixes everything together. So it'd be nice if the compressor heat from the freezer and the refrigerator were used to heat the house or to
Heat water or something. You know, that's-
expel outside during the summer.
In Europe, they like if you have liquid heating in your house, you know, like the radiators, they have that.
For your air source heat pumps, do they collect the heat off the compressor for a preheat for your hot water tank? Because I have that as my ground source heat
You
pump.
could.
So I have a second.
Oh, Terry had his hand up.
Yes, just a tip for people that are shifting their hot water heater. I've been doing it for about 2 or 3 years. I've discovered by accident the best time to turn it on is like about 3:30 or 4 in the morning, so that you have hot water. And I don't heat it any other time of the day other than that. At 7 a.m. it's off all day, and we have plenty of hot water right up until bedtime. And but if I did it earlier in the evening, like at 11 p.m., I would not have that. So if you're thinking about it, that's a good way to do it, is later in the morning, early morning until 7 a.m. And you should probably be able to glide through the whole day without having a hot water tank turned on.
No, that makes sense, especially if you have a larger tank where it takes time to build up the thermal, to heat up the thermal mass, but then you've got it there until you use it up. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Not unlike having your EV finish charging.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, there's good reasons to do that.
Okay, so let Daryl finish his presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so we've gotten to the net metering arrangement with photovoltaics. So I know some people who have talked to me in the last couple of months. We're pretty excited about net metering, where I'll just get a battery for my house. I'll get a net metering agreement, and I'm going to get rich buying power for cheap at night and selling it back to the grid at 28 cents a kilowatt hour. And as much as I wonder about the mental faculties of the provincial government, yeah, no, you can't do that. So the only way you get a net metering arrangement in Ontario is if you have a power generation capability that you can identify, they can look at, because someone will come and visit your house. They're going to do some certification and inspection, and it has to be there. So unless you have the PV part or whatever your energy generation is, but photovoltaics is definitely the expected one in Ontario, you're not going to get this deal. So no net metering without power production. I did some numbers based on a 10 kilowatt array, and the idea of using a whole house battery. The one I picked, because I think the pricing is about the most attractive I've seen announced yet, is the Tesla Powerwall 3, which I understand is going to be available shortly in the US and probably a little later here. And if I got the math right and did the exchange right, it should be around $10,000 for a 32 kilowatt hour pack. So those were the numbers I was working with. And then said, okay, so what happens if we charge it up during the 8 hours and suck the power out of it during the 5 hour periods in the weekdays when the price is at the highest? I assumed a 10-year amortization for this unit. And the conclusion I came to is if we were paying any interest at all on that amount, then it doesn't quite pan out yet.
Yeah.
You're not. That's anyway. So that's my conclusion based on numbers that I thought made sense in terms of our electricity usage and anyhow, you can do with that what you want. I will say, battery prices are coming down.
But Daryl, didn't you say, Daryl, that you only have about 15 kilowatt hour usage to offset?
Not.
The 32 is a pretty big pack.
We're using about 35 to 40 kilowatt hours a day. But the 1 kilowatt is basically just what I use for modeling and during the lowest part of our day. But allowing for what we use for the EVs and stuff at night, yeah, we're using between 35 and 40 kilowatt hours a day. But for us, I mean, it's definitely not going to make sense because our daytime usage is so low that it's just not worth shifting it away for that kind of expenditure. We would probably be looking at something like a 5 kilowatt hour battery might be enough. But I just haven't seen a price point right now yet where I think that makes sense. The load shifting makes sense, but so far the battery system to me does not for us. My other concern is if we get to the point where this is going to work out and we actually think that, yes, we could make money by doing this kind of peak shaving. Now, again, because you have to have photovoltaics today, this is going to skew that conversation. If you're getting free electricity from your panels, that changes the math completely. And I didn't model for that because I have no idea how those numbers are going to work for anyone in particular. And there's that whole issue around in the winter, you will probably not be producing a lot of power during that 4 to 9 p.m. block, but in the summer you will be, so you don't need to shift as much electricity. Anyway, I kept trying to model it and find a way to make that look simple and make sense. I did not succeed. My concern, though, is that if we reach a point where this makes sense financially, will the utilities not buy their own batteries in order to be able to do exactly that function at the grid level? And hopefully that would get reflected in the price at some point.
So I was looking into that today actually for another, because of that BESS project there. It turns out the utilities, the LDCs like the Hydro Ottawa, they're not allowed to buy batteries for this type of stuff. However, just about every one of them have subsidiaries that could do it, right? So here it's
Invari.
there's another one too.
Portage Power.
Sorry?
It's Portage Power.
Portage Power, yeah. Portage Power would be able to do it. Okay, because they're not regulated like Hydro Ottawa is.
Exactly. And basically every LDC in Ontario of any size has the same arrangement.
Yeah. Now, another thing to note here is this is net metering. If you push out more in fees than what you use, you're going to lose it, right? So so you have to think about that too.
So the net metering is on price, on cost, it's not on kilowatts.
Correct.
Yeah.
Kilowatt hours.
Right.
Yes.
So the OEB has just issued a bulletin last year that all the LDCs have to promote that and have to count it that way.
Yeah. But if you produce more on a dollar basis over the course of the year, they will give you a credit, but they will not give you money.
Yeah.
And then you lose it.
You lose it after a while, yeah.
Well, it can be your green tax.
Yeah.
Your red tax.
Or you take in the neighbor's laundry and use your power that way. Who knows, right? We could be creative. So
Isn't
climate change.
OREC, I think OREC is also looking at the possibility of having disconnected suppliers and users.
So virtual, you mean virtual?
Virtual.
Yes,
yeah,
you're looking at that, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that can't take advantage of net metering for a bunch of reasons, right? And the virtual net metering would open up a lot of possibilities there.
So I'm not up to date on that, but I hope to learn more about it. In one of my other lives, I worry a lot about climate change impacts. So it tends to be a lens I look through for everything. And grid reliability is one of the things that may become an issue. It's already been an issue in Ottawa. We are going to have more flooding. We're going to have more dry conditions. So we may need more sump pump work. We may need more well pumps. Anyway, there may be other reasons why you might want to look at a whole house battery in terms of power reliability. But I'm going to find it very hard right now to quantify a way to make a dollar amount for that I think is credible and then that I can defend. That's about people's emotions and sentiments. So the real conclusion. So basically, we're supposed to be trying to figure out a way to encourage people to shift the time when they're using electricity to the low demand periods from the high demand periods. But the actual ULO peak pricing period doesn't align with the actual peak period of power use. I don't understand why there's no winter summer schedule for the ULO regime, especially for the daytime peaks. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying to figure that out. And again, maybe I'm getting jaded and cynical. No, I'm definitely getting jaded and cynical. I do think that the Ontario government is not trying to make this program especially attractive. I don't know if they're worried about a backlash from their political base if the story comes up that, oh, well, you're giving those EV owners a really sweet deal, but I still have to pay a really high rate for my electricity. So what's going on? I don't know if that's in the back of their minds, but I can imagine that that's something that they're thinking about. Next slide.
So, sorry, if you take a bit of a less cynical view of it, you're absolutely right. There's an issue with the peak not matching, right? But if you think about what the naive EV user will do, they'll plug their car when they get home, and it's going to start charging around 4 o'clock and charge for maybe an hour if you're on level 2. So we'll increase the peak quite a bit, right? So having a rate like that may push some people to think about it a bit and move their charging, right?
Possibly. But if you're using the timer on your car, you can set multiple periods. So, I mean,
yeah, but people won't necessarily do it. Yeah, it's if, right? It's not like that by default, right?
Yeah, but if they're looking for the big win financially, they have to be looking at the one that starts at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Okay, so I really see that load shifting has got potential. So long as PV is part of the package for net metering, and if you don't have the PV, I don't see that paying off. But in the load shifting, yeah, absolutely. Think people like EV owners or people who have got some other load that you can move to nighttime and it doesn't matter. There's potentially a win for the ULO rate, but you're going to have to do your own math, I think. I think people are going to have to model what their data looks like to decide whether moving off of time of use or even tiered is the best approach. And I think that's for each of us. But the data is there. You know, you can get it off in Ottawa, the Hydro Ottawa site or Hydro One. And, you know, this may change that wanting to have that battery in your house. Maybe you will want to do that when the price of the batteries comes down, but also watch for what the political environment looks like and how these systems or regimes are going to change with time, because I'm convinced they're going to. So I'm just, you know, expanding on why it's not, ULO is not for everyone, and the environmental win is not necessarily the same as the financial win. Yeah, again, review your own usage, do your own analysis, but it's probably not a no-brainer for most people. All right, so after that horribly long presentation, here are the key points. If you can do your big electric consumption at night, if you can minimize your consumption during the day, if you can do some load shifting and you can maintain the discipline in your household, that has been a challenge here, then yes, you can probably make the time shifting and the ULO rate work. So at that point, if I haven't put you to sleep, I'm willing to try taking on some questions. Maybe I'll have some answers, and my contact information is there. If you missed anything going by, the slide deck obviously is going to be in the recording of the meeting. And
there'll also be a PDF version on our site probably by tomorrow. There's a presentation and meetings tab there, and you can go and look for them there. Okay, yes?
Are there any rules around batteries in the house?
There's nothing in the there is nothing in the building code.
So there is in the electrical code, unfortunately, and it hasn't been updated, at least to my knowledge. But the CSA or the I can't remember the acronym, but anyway, there's the Canadian CEC, Canadian Electrical Code, and there's also an Ontario Electrical Code. Anyway, basically, if you want to have a battery storage system of your house, you're supposed to have it like outside in a shed or something like that. But they don't make any exception for, LFP batteries, which they should, because, LFP batteries are almost impossible to light on fire. So, and, we have other combustibles inside our houses already anyway. Arguably a, gas furnace is probably way worse than a stack of LFP batteries, but I digress. So there is that. But yeah, awesome presentation, Daryl. I have, a few things to add because I've done a ton of analysis in this area myself. And there's also like some possibilities to think about that weren't brought up in terms of like ways to take advantage of this stuff, also protect yourself from future changes to energy prices. So something I've done in my house is I wanted the ability to backup power the house from, in different ways. And so I put in a transfer switch and a separate sub panel. So I have a sub panel that can go off grid. And it's all wired up with the potential in the future to put a more powerful inverter behind it. And instead of getting net metering, my plan is eventually just get some solar and a home battery and just have a partial off grid. So all the stuff that I can't easily reschedule, like cooking and stuff like that, that can be done off the battery. But the EV charging, that'll be done off from grid power, overnight. Even, the air conditioner, that can be scheduled because you can pre-cool the house before 4 p.m. and avoid running the AC too much. I mean, I already did that with the TOU pricing last summer. So this year I'll finally get some data on what it looks like with ULO. So I'm, on the edge of my seat to see the actual results of that. But based on how many hours I could usually go, previously without running the AC once the house was pre-cooled, quite a while, I think I could probably make it through the whole, peak pricing period without running the AC. And I think, most people probably could, but we'll see this summer if that's actually true. And so the thing is, if you build a system like what I'm describing, you could also charge the batteries from grid power. There's no reason you can't do that either. So you could have it all set up so that, look at the weather. You have an automated system that looks at the weather forecast for the next day, predicts how much solar you're going to generate. And then if it's not going to be enough, you can charge using grid power overnight. And then you'll have your battery ready for the next day for all of your usage that can't be rescheduled. But everything else that like is flexible, like running the laundry and stuff, you can do on the weekend, which we already do. We delay the dishwasher, all that kind of stuff. So you can have like a hybrid system where all your grid stuff is load shifted, and then all of your cooking and stuff. Oh yeah, kind of random, but a thought I had while you're doing your presentation, how you showed how the actual peak is before 4 p.m. And so it seems like the pricing is actually counterproductive because like you mentioned, you were prepping your dinner early because of the price. And, I am going to be pre-cooling my house around 2, 3, 4 p.m., running the AC on the actual peak usage period, not the peak pricing period.
Yep.
I'm more likely to be consuming more electricity because during the actual peak time because of the pricing scheme. So it's actually is counterproductive. I mean, I
agree. This is why it's important that we figure out when those periods are and get the alignment right.
Lawrence, can you wrap up? Because we've got a lot of other stuff to cover. Is there other comments?
Yeah. One more thing was just about, it seemed like you were a bit more down on the benefit for EV owners than I think is like, I've been able to get my average electricity price very low. It's actually lower than if I was on TOU and I got 100% of my usage at the weekend price. I'm paying even less than that, just through the combination of load shifting and charging at night.
Yeah, it's occurred to me since I started writing this up that our EV usage is actually really small compared to some other people with EVs. So as Ruan pointed out, I'm still on level 1 charging. So when we're charging our EVs, our maximum possible load is 2 kilowatts.
Yeah, but if you commute as much as I do, you would essentially draw the same power overall, right? You just do it over a longer time. In my case, you know, if I'm doing the average Canadian 42 kilometers a day, well, on level 2, that takes only 1 hour at 30 amp to charge it, right? So
Agreed.
it's a bit,
Anyway, we
right?
can talk about that on the round table.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so thanks very much, Daryl. Great presentation. And now it's Jeff's turn. So Jeff posted some stuff on Facebook, and I asked him if he would be willing to present it to us at our meeting. He said, yeah. So so there's Jeff, and we'll hand it over to him.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name is Jeff Gilchrist. I think I've met some of you at some Cars and Coffees over the last couple of years. This is a picture of my house with our solar panel setup. Just to give you a quick background information, we have 2 EVs at our house. We got our first EV in 2018, and we got our second EV a couple of years ago, and that's when we got rid of our last ICE car. So we're quite excited to have finally a solar setup after we've been waiting like a long time to get something up and running. So next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of background on like what our setup looks like. So some of the installation costs and the specs. So we have a 15.4 kilowatt solar array, which is made up of 32 panels, and there's 18 panels facing south and slightly west, and 14 panels facing east and slightly south. And paired with that is a 10 kilowatt solar edge inverter. So the 15.4 kilowatts DC power from the solar, the max we can convert into AC to use for our house or the grid is 10 kilowatts. The company that installed our equipment is Future Solar and Electric. And this is the part that usually shocks most people, but our setup was around $40,000, including taxes before any rebates. Thankfully, we were able to take advantage of the $5,000 Canada Green Homes grant, which unfortunately is now closed. And we also took advantage of the Greener Homes loan. So in our case, we used the remaining $35,000 for a 10-year interest-free loan. So the interesting part for us, obviously $40,000 is a big upfront cost, but from a cash flow perspective, so we used to have a Honda Accord before we got rid of our last ICE vehicle. And with the amount of driving we do now, which is less than before, because most of us are working from home in the house right now, we're usually saving about like roughly $294 a month in gas, which is more than our $286 a month loan. So what's interesting is that doesn't even take into account the additional electrical saving costs. So our monthly cash flow hasn't really changed by adding this like 10-year loan onto our mix because of the savings in gas. So it really wasn't much of a hit for us to take this on, thankfully. Next slide, please.
So sorry, so when I saw this gas, I thought I was thinking fossil gas, but this is gas in your vehicle, right? That you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one other point I want to make is the Canada Greener Homes Grant Program is closed because they run out of money a year ahead of time. Okay. Now, what I know, I don't know the details, but I know there's another program that's going to be introduced. Should be fairly soon that will replace that. Okay, so
And also just closed means if you're starting fresh, it doesn't, it means if you're in the process, you can still go through the process.
absolutely, yeah. So if you're just
Take 2 years to pay out.
yeah, it takes a little. But yeah, so if you're looking at doing something like this, you probably, and you're not already in it, you probably want to wait to see what the offer will be. Okay.
Right, so I've sort of plotted out our production and consumption graphs over the year. In Ottawa, I guess it's interesting to note that the shortest daylight day is about 8 hours and 43 minutes, and then there's like a massive difference on the longest day. It goes up to 15 hours and 39 minutes, so much more potential for producing solar power in the summertime. So as you can see, like on the left side of the graph, in January, we produced almost nothing compared to our consumption. In February, it was a little bit higher. There's a little bit less snow on the panels at that point. Just by comparison, this year, because it's been a really insane winter, we've produced 4 times as much power in January and more than twice as much in February so far. So obviously it makes sense as you get further into the summer that the solar production goes up because daylight hours are longer. We had a bit of a May was exceptionally high this year compared to normal, and June was much lower than normal because of all the wildfire smoke. So again, other potential climate issues that can impact your generation as well. So anyways, you can sort of see that it kind of goes up in the summer, then goes back down again in the wintertime. So if you break down kind of like our overall consumption and generation over the year, We ended up using about like 82.3% of our entire house's load, including charging electric vehicles, was around 82%. So we actually covered the majority of it. And so that means that we relied on about 17.7% from the grid. And over the entire year, we produced 15.9 megawatt hours of power, and we consumed 19.4. Again, like I said, since we work from home more now than we used to, we only drive around 25,000 kilometers a year. It used to be more than that. And just looking at how much we spent charging our cars versus the house, we used about 22% of our entire annual power load to charge our cars, and so that left like about 78 for the house. So that's kind of like how the breakdown happened over that period of time.
I'm curious if you're on ULO and if the price was a different shift.
Yeah, so we can talk about that in a second. So so this is basically on tier, like this is tiered. Up until January, everyone that was on net metering had to be on the tiered plan until someone challenged them, and then now we can select. So everything I'm showing you now was on tiered because that's what we were forced to do. So these graphs are basically an example of like one specific day. So you can see on the energy balance graph on the left, although we use like 82% of our like net solar generation was from the sun, we didn't actually use that amount from the solar panels itself, because you can see on the left-hand side, so in production, like that particular day, so 66% of the power that we generated actually went back into the grid. So we used 34% for our house, but 66 went back into the grid. And then we needed to use about 38 kilowatt hours of power from the grid that day, just because of the timing offset. So if you look at the corresponding graph on the right, you can see in the morning we had the EV set to charge so that the battery pack was nice and warm. This was in the winter time. So the battery pack was nice and warm when we were ready to go out and leave in the morning. So you can see the massive spike of our level 2 EV charging in the morning. And then you can see the nice green graph is like the sun comes up and the generation quickly goes up until like noon. And then there was probably a bit of cloud cover that made it drop down a bit, and then it started going back down. So this is like a mostly cloudless day. And then you can see some other spikes. So like we did two loads of laundry that day. So you can see the two spikes from the dryer, and then we went somewhere in the evening, so we were preheating the car. So you can see that spike. But as you can see, during the day, we didn't have a massive load of energy, so we were putting most of it into the grid. And then before the sun was up and after the sun was down, we used quite a bit of power. So we actually took a lot out of the grid and put a lot back in at different times. So if you look at the actual year, we ended up putting in 7.1 megawatt hours into the grid, which was about like 45% of the solar power we generated went to the grid, and we kept like about 55%. So a bunch of fun facts. So with net, I think it was mentioned slightly before, but for those of you that aren't familiar, net metering works on credits. So the solar power that you put into the grid is given as a credit as the same rate as your plan. So like I said, we're on tiered plan. So I think in the summertime, it's the first 600 kilowatt hours are at a certain rate, and then it goes up. So for the first 600 kilowatt hours you put into the grid, you get the lower rate, and then anything above that, you start getting the higher rate. If you switch to time of use, then that might be the sweet spot for solar production, because it has the high rates during the actual peak time of the sun, and the ultra low rates. Again, maybe this is another reason why the Ontario government chose this, is because it's specifically offset to minimize the amount of money you can make, or not minimize, but it purposely offsets the peak out of the way of solar production. So, basically, whatever you put in, you get a credit for. But the other poison pill they kind of put into it is your credits get deleted after 12 months of contiguous accumulation. So you have to look up the net metering Ontario regulation section 8 if you want to see the actual legalese speak. That's a bit hard to decode, but essentially, if your solar array produces more than 100% of your annual electric usage cost, then you're donating the rest of it. So the way it works in practice is after 12 months of credit, like for month 13, instead of them rolling the credit over onto your next bill, it just gets cut to zero, and you start back at nothing. So that's why you'll see if people are building solar arrays for their houses, they're not building to be like 150% of their annual capacity. They're trying to be at 100% or lower, so that you aren't, otherwise you're just basically giving power into the system for free. So something else that people that don't already have solar panels don't necessarily understand is what happens when the grid goes down. So the solar panels and inverter are automatically disconnected from the house, which means it's also disconnected from the grid for safety. So your house won't have any power even if it's sunny outside. So you might have a nice big solar array, the power's out in the neighborhood, it's super sunny outside, and your house is just as dead as everyone else's, unless you have some kind of specialized disconnect solution set up to keep the solar power from the grid. So another use for batteries is not just for nighttime use or cloudy days or load or time shifting, but it also allows you to actually use your solar when the grid is down. So this allows the solar system to remain disconnected from the grid. So now your batteries are supplying power to the house, and then the solar panel can actually recharge and keep those batteries topped up while the sun is shining. So it allows you to actually use your solar panels while the grid is down. Lawrence, do you have a question?
Yeah, so this is kind of worth a bit of a asterisk, but one of the things with solar and wanting to be able to have solar and backup power is that the grid interconnect thing makes things really messy. So just having a battery alone actually doesn't solve the problem, right? The issue is that your solar system, and if you had a solar and battery system in conjunction, you'd most likely have a grid tied inverter. And so the battery doesn't change the fact that your inverter is grid tied. If you want to be able to use your power offline, you have to have a second inverter that connects to, so your solar battery system is going to have a DC side and an AC side. The DC side is always going to be working whether the power's on or not, or whatever, whether the grid's working or whatever. The DC voltage is coming out of the panels. What actually prevents the energy from going into the grid when there's a power outage is the inverter itself. That's going to shut down. And so if you want to be able to use your energy during a power outage, you need another inverter also connected to the DC side of your system that can produce AC electricity. And so having a battery doesn't solve that problem. You still need to have separate inverters for grid tied and off grid. The battery, though, does make it a lot more usable in a power outage because you may have spiky loads or whatever that are higher than what the panels can provide. And so the battery is going to ensure that your off-grid power is much more useful than just panels alone. But it's worth mentioning, like, the inverter is the problem, and it's one reason why going for a hybrid solution like I was talking about earlier, where you have a hybrid off-grid, is actually a great idea if you want it to be a power outage solution, because then you only have to buy one inverter. You don't need to buy a grid-tied inverter. Your whole solar system and whatever is completely not the concern of the grid.
Right, which brings me to this slide, which I'm about to explain some of that. So we're now in the experimental part of setting up a whole home battery backup setup, which, as Lawrence mentioned, it's not just about having the battery. You actually need some way to have it disconnected from the grid. So in our case, we're going to be using a Solar Edge home battery backup interface, so the grid is connected to that interface, your inverter is connected to the interface, the battery is connected to the interface, and it controls what power goes where, allowing you to be disconnected from the grid while having your regular solar inverter working and bringing power into your battery and or to your home. So you do need a separate kind of interface depending on what kind of solution you're going for to actually provide that. The other nice thing, since we're talking about V to H, is that there's going to be a bidirectional EV charger coming soon that you can also connect to this home backup interface. So besides having your whole home battery backup packs, you can also theoretically connect your vehicle that supports V to H to your house as well to do that backup. So again, from the picture, you can see there's a crate. This is still sitting in our garage. We haven't had this installed yet, so I can't tell you how well it works or some of the nuances of it, but we've essentially decided to go with a solution that's not necessarily cost effective or will pay itself back easily, but it's more for our own ease of use and to maintain, being able to do stuff at home when we want to. So in our particular case, again, just to make everything work easily together, we went with 2 Solar Edge DC home batteries, so a total of 20 kilowatt hours. The interesting thing about this is the batteries have a DC interface, so they can charge directly from the solar panels. But the big drawback is they have a maximum of a 40 amp continuous max output. So so in this case, you have to be careful like what you're actually running in your home. So it'll ramp up to 62 amps for 10 seconds for certain startup loads. But in our particular setup, you can't just like run your entire house, the entire load of whatever you want continuously. You have to be very selective of what you want. The interesting thing about our particular setup is you don't have to have a sub panel set up. It's connected to your entire panel. So you have maximum flexibility for what you want to run, but that also means you have full responsibility to ensure that you don't go above that the maximum output that's allowed, or it'll shut itself down. So one of the other neat things about this specific setup is you might remember that I mentioned that we have a 10 kilowatt inverter. So you can see in the graph at the bottom, there's a nice flat bar at the very top. So that's our solar panels are producing more than 10 kilowatts of power, but you can only convert 10 kilowatts into AC power. So it's called clipping. Because the batteries can have a DC interface, can charge directly from DC, that additional power above the 10 kilowatts can actually be captured and charged directly into the battery. So you could be trying to put the maximum power back into the grid and also have some spare to charge your battery at the same time, which is kind of the neat, one of the neat options that's available. With this particular setup, with our estimated base load to be able to live comfortably, we're using some basic things like all of our fridges and freezers are running. We still have a bit of power to watch TV or Netflix, do a bit of stuff on the internet. This setup should last us almost 2 days with no sun, but we're hoping that there'd at least be some sun during the day to help recharge the batteries and get us up and running so that we can survive a longer period of time. So that's just sort of like the quick and dirty presentation of what we're trying to do. Hopefully in the future I'll have much more information about how well the battery pack is working and kind of the neat things you can do for shifting. I have no idea if this particular setup will let you actually dump power back into the grid. Like we've got the net metering setup, but I don't know if it'll allow us to do that. So thank you.
How much were the batteries?
The batteries are very, very expensive. Again, they're not the most cost-effective solution, but again, we weren't trying to do these on a cost recovery basis. So these batteries are 10 kilowatts each, and I think they're roughly estimate that they're probably around $10,000 a pop, plus you have like whatever electrical work you need to do. So yeah, they're not cheap. It's obviously, if you had a nice 70 kilowatt hour battery in your EV that you could just plug into your house, that would be much nicer. Unfortunately, the two EVs that we have don't support that, so we don't have that option. But yeah, they're very expensive.
They're AGM batteries?
AGM batteries?
Yeah, they're lead acid or AGM glass matte batteries, which is an acid battery.
Oh, no, they're lithium ion based batteries.
Like LFP, right? Probably. They're LFP?
I'm not sure if they're LFPs, but yeah, I don't off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact chemical formula. I'm pretty sure they're not LFPs, but they're some form of lithium ion battery. And someone else was asking about where you can install them. So yeah, typically that things get installed in garages or outside. We're in the process of trying to get a variance to install them in our basement, since these particular ones were designed to be used inside of homes, and they're certified to do that in the US and other places, but I guess Canada's a little bit behind on their certification. And from what we understand, next year they're supposed to update the electrical code to allow these type of batteries to be installed inside the house. So we're trying to see right now if we can actually get that done. If we can't, then the workaround for that is you have to build a closet or a small room that's rated for 1 hour fire safety. And if you do that, you can put the batteries inside that to meet their requirements. So if you build a 1 hour fire rated room, you can still install the batteries with the current electrical code inside your house.
So one thing I want to make very clear here, because it's often misunderstood, LFP and NMC and all of those, they're all lithium ion. Okay, they're all lithium ion. Okay, so because there's been a lot of talk, and we have this problem with the battery electric storage system, where people were saying they're not lithium, they're LFP. Well, no, LFP is lithium ion also. It's just the FP that's different. from what is normally cobalt, manganese, and nickel, right?
Which is iron phosphate. Which is iron.
Iron phosphate, I said, yeah. So there was a question?
Steve has a question.
Thank you. Great presentation, Jeff. I've had a solar array on my roof since 2015 on the Ontario Microfit program. I just want to tell folks out there that it's a different concept than what you have, and it worked really, really well for me. 40 cents a kilowatt hour. And it set up the business with an HST number, so I charge 13%, of which I get a lot of that back by input tax credits and the quick accounting method. It's a shame that it went away. I think you really would have appreciated it. And other thing, Jeff, I just wanted to, I saw a picture of your solar array there. Do you have a squirrel cage around your solar array?
Yes, there's critter guard all around the array to stop animals from getting it.
I just want to put that out. I learned the hard way that's a really good investment when you do that, because it cost me $2,800 in 2020 after the first time I got rid of that mess myself, and I was not going to go out the second time and risk breaking my back to get rid of it. So I hired a guy 6 years after I put it in. So I'm just going to shoot you a picture there in the chat of my solar array. But a great presentation, and I wish they'd bring that back and make sense for me to sell it off for 40 cents a kilowatt hour and charge my two electric vehicles at 2.8 cents a kilowatt hour between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m.
Yeah, but
Steve,
that's the microfit will never come back. The reason they had that was to incent people to deploy solar when solar was not affordable without something like that, right? So it's never going to come back.
I saw that, Raymond, and I just jumped right on it.
Yeah. So actually, I know someone who's got both. Art Hunter, he's got a microfit, and he also has a separate array that's on net metering. So he's cashing a lot of money with his solar stuff. So thanks a lot, Jeff. Great presentation. And I think the next one is
All right, so we're talking about the news, and we now start off with members who take pictures of coolie beads out in the wild. So Mark, you're first up with an Intelcom electric vehicle, and Intelcom does all the Amazon deliveries around Ottawa for the most part, and so good bag on that, right on Coventry. Steve was just talking, and he spotted a Cybertruck at Fells Corners, so that's cool. It's obviously not from Ontario because it's missing the front license plate, so probably just passing through. And then
it was from Texas plates.
Texas plates, there you go. And then some weirdo spotted a Fisker Ocean at the Cars and Coffee the other week there.
Why is the car next to it not painted?
Yeah, the gray one is the cool car. But anyway, some guy named Mike, I don't know. All right, so the city that rhymes with fun is buying up to 53 Nova electric buses, which sounds great, but they're only getting 7 for now. But if they end up buying these 7, and if the city of Ottawa continues to drag its feet on e-buses, then through just chance, the most backward province in Canada will have more electric buses on the road than the city of Ottawa, the nation's capital. So that's kind of shameful. So hopefully Ottawa gets those buses this year, because we have 4 and they are going to have 7, and we can't be worse than Regina. Like, come on. Anyway, they plan to be 100% renewable by 2050, so they're not even trying. They're planning on using or purchasing 13 more next year, 33 eventually, for a total of 53. Nova Bus. So the person from Nova Bus that's in the article, it's linked at the presentation. He says that the majority of their orders so far this year have been all electric, which is an interesting statement coming from a bus manufacturer. He said that the industry has reached the tipping point in the transition to electric. So the majority of Nova buses being ordered now are electric, not diesel. So that's a really cool thing. And Ottawa's supposed to get Nova buses as well. So we're going to get these apparently on the 29th. So in a couple days, 3 days, the Transit Commission's having a meeting. And I'm going to watch it and see what they say. Hopefully, or it's an LRT update, so they might talk about buses. Probably not. All right. Honda has announced prices for its first electric car, the Prologue. which I keep getting confused with the Prelude, which is a very different vehicle. Anyway, so the Prologue will be their first EV in Canada. Its delivery is starting very soon, this spring, so they're ready to go. It's priced to receive the IZEV rebate. So when they originally announced it for Canada, they were saying it's going to be around mid-60s. But then IZEV, they wanted to get the IZEV, so they've actually priced it just below, $10 below the threshold to qualify. So IZEV for the win, again, pushing prices down a little bit. Mid-range is still 65, and the top of the line is 70. It shares a platform with the Blazer EV, but if you want a Blazer that has Apple CarPlay, buy the Honda. Because the Honda has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, Chevys will not. Also, this has Honda software, not Chevy software, which has caused a stop sale on the Blazers. So Chevy's having issues. It has 452 kilometer range, 150 kilowatt fast charging, 85 kilowatt hour battery pack. So pretty decent specs, not terrible, not too shabby. Pretty good first attempt for Honda, even though it's not their own car, it's a Chevy. Hilariously, it has OnStar as well. So if you're a Chevy person, you can get, if you're a Honda person, you now can have access to Chevy OnStar. So
The reviews are pretty good.
the reviews are pretty good. It's a very solid first attempt. So well done, Honda. Good job. Hyundai, so not Honda, trademarks the Ioniq T10, which is suggesting a potential pickup. That is not the T10. That is a Honda, whatever they call it. It's a gas car, that one. But the T10 has been filed under automobiles, electric cars, trucks, lorries, sport utility vehicles. So this is why people are thinking it's going to be a pickup truck, and T kind of sort of leads that. And 10, people are sort of reading the tea leaves here, just thinking that 10 means it'll be the biggest vehicle in the Ioniq lineup. Although I don't know if that holds, because the Ioniq 7 is not big.
6 is smaller than a.
6 is smaller than the 5. Who knows? So I wouldn't buy that.
Is that Australian? Because they said lorry.
Yes.
In the UK, they're also good.
This is from Australia. It's Drive Australia. Figure this out. Kia has also revealed plans for a couple of electric pickups, so I assume they'll share the same sort of platform and DNA. T for truck, 10, yeah. They've also trademarked Ioniq T7, which would be probably similar to the truck you see pictured there. Hopefully, we'll see. Tommy.
It looks like a weird. The picture looks like the Mazda SUV, the gas one,
It kind of looks like an El Camino.
and
Yeah.
the color.
Yeah, the Taco. Who knows? This is just a gas car, but it's a Hyundai, so it's sort of similar to what they might release. I just need the picture for the slide.
Curious that they haven't trademarked everything that's Ioniq something.
Yeah,
Why did they have to specifically the T7 and the T10? Like,
who knows? We will never know the vagaries of Hyundai's corporate leadership. Their first EV plant in the US, which if you've been following EVCO news for a while, you know that they started construction of the factory ahead of schedule because the IRA was announced in the US, so they bumped their plans to build a factory by a few months. And now that factory is going to turn on a few months ahead of schedule as well. So they're expecting it to start cranking out vehicles as early as October of this year. The original plan was 2025. It wasn't even supposed to start for construction until 2023, but they actually started it in October 2022. So they have been putting their foot down on building an EV battery and vehicle plant in North America. And once this plant is ramped, it will reach 300,000 EVs per year. But they can do up to 500,000 if they wanted to. And it'll be producing all of the Ioniq and EV marks for North America consumption. So
where's it located?
it is in the US South.
It's
It's in Tennessee, I think. It's in the US South where they don't have unions and they have cheap labor.
they accelerated it because of the IRA. Right?
Yeah. So the Inflation Reduction Act in the US is it gives access to $7,500 if you buy an EV, but the EV has to have mostly been built in the US or North America, and there's some exceptions for Canada and Mexico. And the batteries have to be sourced from here. So this is why Hyundai, which currently builds most of their vehicles in Korea, really put their foot down to get this thing built so they can start cranking out, taking advantage of these rebates. But despite not being eligible for the rebates right now, Hyundai is in second place in the US for EV sales, behind only Tesla. So they're already outselling the incumbents, despite being crippled by having no access to that rebate.
But they have great cars.
But they have great cars and they're priced well, so there you go. I'm not biased at all. They're also going to introduce the Ioniq 7 in June. So this is a 3-row SUV similar to the EV9. It's a sister vehicle to the EV9. So it will be released at the Busan Motor Show on June 27th. And I think that's all I need to say about that. It's EGMP, so it'll have 2 battery flavors. Not sure which one will come to Canada, if both will or just one. Access to the 350 kilowatt charging, just like everyone else. Charge time in 25 minutes because the battery is enormous. Production is going to start in Korea in July, so the very next month, and then US once that factory is online. So keep an eye on that. That's the concept vehicle in the picture, as it says, 7 concept. So it will look similar, but not the same.
So Mark and Stephen are mentioning that the plant is in Georgia.
Georgia, yeah, that makes sense. US South, somewhere where there's no unions, so they use workers. New North American charging network has finally gotten a name. So if you were paying attention a while ago, a bunch of automakers got together to create a new charging network to rival Tesla. It's now called Iona, which is a play on Ionity North America. So if you are into EV nerdism, Europe has an Ionity network of which a lot of these companies are a part of. Ionity is a very well-regarded charging network in Europe. It's very reliable. It has fast chargers. They have beautiful stations and beautiful charging pedestals and everything. So hopefully that DNA makes its way over here as part of the Iona network. Some big names are part of this. So BMW, GM, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, and even everyone's favorite Ask Your Doctor Medicine, Stellantis. They've teamed up together to create this network. They want to build a minimum of 30,000 high-power chargers, with the first expected to open in the US this year, and then Canada eventually, because we're always late. It'll be accessible to all EVs. It'll have NACS and CCS. Sorry, Leaf owners, you're not allowed to play with this. And it'll have restrooms, food service, retail, canopies, all that good stuff. It'll feature integrated in-vehicle experiences for participating manufacturers. So those of you with Ioniqs and EVs with numbers will be able to probably plug and charge. It has intelligent reservations, so you can tell it, yes, question. Okay, I'll finish my sentence. So it'll have intelligent route planning. So when you're in your Ioniq 5, like me, you'll just put in your thing and it'll tell you how many spots are available, and you can book the one ahead of time, and so that there's a charger ready for you when you arrive. It had additional features, which you can say, and then payment, so plug and charge, presumably, is what that means.
Is this kind of like the gas station, but with electrons concept that we've kind of been clamoring for a while?
Pretty much, yeah, that's what it sounds like. They haven't released too many details, but it definitely sounds like they're going for like the, gas station, service station concept.
Yeah, but in Europe, it's a place where you want to stay for 20 or 30
Yeah,
minutes.
it's like a nice place. They'll have
Like
a
a
park.
station with nothing else. to do.
Yeah, so like in Europe, the Ionity stations have things like playgrounds for kids to, stretch their legs, and they'll have like a coffee shop and, like a place you can have a picnic. Like they're nice stations. They have solar canopies in some of them. Like they're cool, right? So hopefully that's what happens here too, because that's what we need in North America. We don't want to have more chargers in the back end of a Walmart parking lot where the shipping and receiving happens, which is sort of what we have now. Stellantis finally adopts NACS, but they did not sign a deal with Tesla, so they don't get to play with the Tesla supercharger network. So that's an interesting choice, Stellantis. Good job. They're the last of our automakers, the big groups. So basically now we can say every EV will have the same plug, the J3400 NACS connector. And yeah, they're a founding member of Iona, as I already mentioned. So that's cool. Here is my updated NACS thing. So Canoe, Ferrari, and Aston Martin are the only holdouts still. Canoe Canoo barely makes any vehicles. Ferrari, nobody can buy them anyway, and they don't. Do they even have an EV? I think
No.
the Enzo not yet. And Aston Martin, whatever.
That's what they're supposed to be making one, but.
Sure, who knows? Whatever, they don't count. Chrysler is insisting that it is not dead. They've revealed a concept car that will never see the light of day, but it looks cool. It's Halcyon. It looks like it's from the Minority Report or something, which is neat. So they're approaching their 100th anniversary, and maybe they'll survive long enough to see their 100th anniversary next year. It's a roadster. It has AI because that's the hot thing that everyone wants. It's supposedly autonomous, like every Tesla, sure. It'll self-drive across the continent in 2017. Totally. It'll have 800-volt EV architecture with lithium sulfur batteries, which is an interesting choice. Supposedly it'll have unlimited range because it'll do the Detroit charging in the road nonsense that no municipality will ever install on any highway ever. But this will have the ability to use the 10 feet of road that they have in Detroit to charge. So if you keep driving around that block, you can have unlimited range. So that'll be cool. It's inductive charging, yeah. They said conductive in their press release, so that's what I put it in.
They said that.
It's in quotations because that's what they put. So this is how on the ball price tag is.
I read the quotes.
Yeah, no, conductive. I'm like, every charger is conductive. That's how metal and electricity works. But
Walk on the road then.
But yeah, don't walk on the road because you might get zapped with 800 volts. So it's a cool car. Hopefully something comes of it. They've been sort of talking about going EV. For those who aren't aware, Chrysler has exactly 2 vehicles on the road in the market. Actually, do they still have the 300?
No.
Chrysler makes exactly 1 vehicle. It's called the Pacifica, and it's a minivan.
Yeah, but Stellantis in Europe has a whole bunch of,
It's not under the Chrysler badge.
not under the Chrysler badge.
So Chrysler has 1 car. This will be their second. And it's, yeah, okay. Ford has leaked the adapter. They have an MSRP of $1, which I'm assuming is incorrect. But this is what the J3400 to CCS adapter could look like. It showed up on their parts website, so it's probably legit. They took it down immediately, but of course the internet never forgets. So there you go.
The $1 is if you have a serial number for a Ford.
Yeah, probably.
They're giving it away.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not to everybody.
But there are no specs, so we don't know what the maximum supported charge rates are. We don't know what the amperage limits are. We don't know any of that, but we know what it looks like. And hopefully that latch is more robust than it seems and is actual metal and not plastic, but.
So that button doesn't look very good.
Yeah, no, there's some concerns when I look at that picture. So good luck with that. Continuing on with Ford. So if you've been following the news, you'll hear that Ford and GM are both saying that demand for EVs is waning and that nobody wants to buy EVs, despite the fact that the market has hit record sales every year in the past 10 years, including last year where they had record deliveries and sales for EV. So clearly the market is starting to soften or something, but that's what they're saying publicly. But if you look at what they're doing, they've actually created a skunkworks program to create a low-cost EV because they are scared to death of China and the Chinese startups coming over to North America and selling inexpensive electric cars. And this, to me, says that they're essentially admitting that they screwed up. Because when they entered the market with EVs, their EVs cost $100,000, right? And now nobody can afford that because interest rates are high and, we're all poor because capitalism. So they basically misjudged the market and now they're trying to play catch up by making an affordable EV because they see Hyundai and Kia selling much less expensive cars. They've slashed the price on the Mach-E. And even then it's just barely competitive with Tesla. So this is them basically admitting they're wrong through their actions, but not their words. So there you go. They've hired a 12-year Tesla veteran, and they're running it in Irvine, California as a startup. So it's not even associated with the mothership. It is on its own, doing its own thing, which is probably a smart move for Ford because they're a bureaucratic nightmare. Next slide. Yeah, spoilers. Ford has slashed the prices of the Mach-E. So the base model fell by $5,000. I'm sure everyone's kind of heard of that. So it competes well now with the Model Y, the base Y, which is $53,990. So it's still a little more expensive, but within shouting distance, so good enough. The premium fell a whopping $12,000, almost $13,000. So that put it in line with cars like the ID4 Pro, the EV6 Long Range, all-wheel. And again, it's still a little more expensive than those competitors, but it's close enough. Now those other cars have some better features than the Mustang, especially the EV6, which has much faster charging capabilities and stuff, and is a bit more efficient. So, but it's good enough that if you're like in the market for a Ford and you prefer Ford over Kia, then you'd probably go with this. And then the GT Performance fell $25,000. So this kind of shows you how overpriced Ford had put their cars. This car used to be close to $100,000, and now it's 72, which puts it within shouting distance of the top of the line Model Y, but yet not cheaper, right? So they still can't quite compete with Tesla. And of course, the Tesla has better charging, better network, all that stuff. But the Ford comes in cool colors, so.
So the margins must be great for Ford.
Totally, yeah. So this is, again, actions are louder than words, and this is Ford admitting that they came in with expensive vehicles that nobody wants. I mean, the vehicles are good, it's just they're too expensive, right? I'll get to questions at the end, because I want to just go quickly here. Volvo has renamed EVs and plug-in hybrids to avoid confusion, which is thank the gods. So the Volvo XC40 Recharge and the C40 Recharge, which were always weird and awkward names, are now being renamed to the EC40. So the C40 is turning into the EC40, and the XC40 is turning into the EX40, and they're dropping the Recharge thing because that's stupid. So you'll have the EX40 and the EC40, and they are joining the EX30 and the EX90 and the EM90. And you see the trends, see the pattern, see how they kind of fit together now. The fossil versions of the XC40 will continue to say XC40. And then the plug-in hybrids will be getting a T6 and T8 badge to indicate output levels, apparently. I don't know what T is as far as outputs go, but whatever. The electric vehicle versions have a consistent naming scheme now, and so things will be less confusing. If you're wondering about the EM90 minivan, yeah, that is not for us. That is only for Europe, unfortunately. I know, shucks. Ineos has revealed its first electric vehicle, the Fusilier. This joins the Grenadier and the Quartermaster. They have a very military theme thing going on there. Ineos, if you've never heard of it, is a luxury car brand that was created by a British billionaire who got upset that Land Rover was getting rid of the Defender and decided to take his ball and make his own Defender, which is what he did with the Grenadier. The Grenadier is a very expensive $100-something thousand gas vehicle. So this will be their first EV. It's basically like a Jimny and a G-Wagon had an illegitimate love child. They've partnered with Magna. Which is a good sign because Magna is legit. And it'll be built in the Graz, Austria facility, which currently makes the G-Wagon. So I wonder if Mercedes has some thoughts on that. The Z4, the Toyota Supra, and the Fisker Ocean is also built there. So it's credible construction shops for this. There are some alarming things that Ineos has said about the EV, how they see EVs as being an around town vehicle and stuff. So yeah, and they do plan on having a gas motor backup for this vehicle, a range extender version. So I wouldn't hold my breath that the ultimate off-road militaristic cool vehicle is here. Although the Grenadier is really dope if you want to take a look at that at some point. Alex on Autos bought one and did a whole review, and it's a gas car, but it's very cool. It has toggle switches up in the headliner, which is like very Boeing and cool. It's like military path. It's really neat if you're into that. Jeep's first EV. I shouldn't have put may arrive in July because that's weird. Because it might arrive in July. So it's the first EV from Jeep. Jeep doesn't currently make any EVs. They have a plug-in hybrid Wrangler, of course. But this will be their first all-electric car. It's the Wagoneer S, so it'll be expensive. They expect it to come in July. It's entering production in the second quarter of this year, so April-ish. It can do 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds and have a 400-mile range. Sure. This isn't, oh, no, it's Stella. It's on the Stella Large because there's Stellantis, still everyone's favorite EV truck. Wrangler, like Jeep Recon, will be launched by the end of this year. So if you're waiting for an electric Jeep, you keep waiting. But this vehicle is going to cost like $100,000. All right. Gas-powered vehicles have already peaked in Canada. In fact, they peaked in 2017. So according to an article or a report done by 440 Megatons, and they use Statistics Canada data, so shout out to StatCan, gas-powered vehicles peaked in 2017, and global gas vehicles peaked also in 2017 that year. So 2017 was the best it was going to get for gas cars. As we all know, it's 10% market share right now for plugins. They're growing at a rate of almost 50% year over year and have been since 2017. The gas cars have been declining by 6.3. Now you'll notice that it's 46% year over year and 6.3 year over year, not the same number. If you're good at mathematicals. And the reason for that is because growth rates are different depending on how big you are already. And overall car sales are dropping as well. So the net, like that 100% represents fewer vehicles net. It's not that complicated. You can figure it out. But anyway, yeah, so that's good. US added 1.2 million EVs and the electricity use fell last year. So for all those people that are like, what is going to happen when everyone switches to EV? The grid's going to explode. Demand in the US for electricity has actually been flat for 20 years. Between 3.8 and 4 terawatt hours per year, roughly, is what the US consumes every year, and it has since the early 20s, early 2000s, the noughties, if you will. And this is despite seeing an increase of basically a Canada added to them. Plus, houses got bigger, you make mansions. They added 5,000 data centers, which just suck power like crazy, right? Bitcoin and all that nonsense. And they've added 2.5 million EVs to the road. And even with all of that extra consumption, electricity demand stayed flat. Yeah, EV sales, I should have put the demand chart on there because it's cool. It's like, it's very flat. I mean, it varies a little bit, but it's basically flat. The reason that it stayed flat is because of efficiency increases. They had a 50% improvement in energy intensity, which is the amount of energy you use versus the GDP, right? So between 1980 and 2014, they basically cut the amount of energy it took to do a GDP in half, which is cool. And they actually last year saw a 1% decline in energy use. Basically what that means is that if you do the math, they could have added 10 million cars, 10 million EVs could have been added to the grid last year in the US, and they wouldn't have seen an increase in demand for electricity. It would have just stayed flat year on year instead of dropping 1%, which is crazy. So that's, take that, skeptics or whatever. I don't know. Okay, where are all the Ultium cars? So this came out a couple days ago, and it is fascinating. It is a look behind the curtain of General Motors. The journalist that wrote it, really smart guy, and he got a real great access to GM. So in March 2020, GM had an EV day where they announced the Ultium platform. And they said all of these vehicles will be Ultium vehicles, and they will be launched and on the road by 2023. Okay. And that includes like a half dozen vehicles, right? Got the Silverado, the Blazer, the Equinox, the Lyriq, 2 versions of the Hummer, right? The SUV and the pickup version. And they will be sold in large numbers by 2024. And they're going to challenge Tesla on the dominance of EV sales, right? They want to have 400,000 Ultium vehicles per year being delivered by 2023, right? By the end of 2023, their plan was to deliver 400,000 Ultium vehicles. Do you know how many they actually delivered in 2023? 13,000. Well, almost 14,000. And I'm trying. 9,000 of them were the Lyric. So the majority were one vehicle. And there's a stop sale on the Blazer. There's a stop sale on the Silverado, apparently. And this is all because they can't produce battery modules, not the cells. Apparently the cell factory is actually cranking them out. They have so many cells they don't know what to do with. They just can't put them in the modules, which then go into the packs. So apparently they fixed that. So look for 6-digit deliveries in 2024 of Ultium-based vehicles. Honda is also in this list. They're expecting 70,000 Prologues delivered from GM this year. And they seem very confident that they will get all of those vehicles. So cool. Good luck, GM. All right, now we're in the Tesla corner, so we're almost done, Raymond. Everyone was talking. I don't know. I learned about this because a friend asked me what EV charger to buy, and I recommended the universal wall connector, even though I was getting an Ionic. And then he asked me, like, what's this PowerShare thing? And I was like, what are you talking? And so I Googled it. And so Tesla PowerShare is a thing that they like quietly launched with the Cybertruck and the universal wall connector. So if you have a Tesla wall connector or a Tesla universal connector, and you have a Cybertruck, you can buy this cool box called the Gateway 3V, which I think does more than 3 volts, probably. And it allows owners of Cybertrucks to use up to 11.5 kilowatts from their vehicle to power their house without an inverter, right? The vehicle's inverter does the DC to AC conversion. And it just, you plug in with your standard max connector and then your house can run. And it's behind the meter, and the gateway, there's different ways of configuring it, but basically the gateway can run your house during a blackout. If you have a Cybertruck, a typical Cybertruck can power a house for 3 days because the battery's enormous. And it does 240 volts AC, right? So it can run your house. So this is cool. And this is not something that anybody's really talking about. And it comes with a Cybertruck. So hopefully in the future Teslas will also be able to do this. It seems like they might. And you don't need to buy like a magic inverter, like the $10,000 Ford thing. It just comes with your car. So this is really cool. Tesla adds charge port defrosting. So if you own a Tesla, there's a new version of software that is coming out now. So go look for it, I guess, or whatever. So it'll preheat it'll give you a timer on your preheating of the battery as you're coming up to a supercharger to let you know when it'll be ready. It'll thaw out your port connector thing. And then there's a more accurate battery range estimate for older Teslas. So if you own an older Tesla and you get this update, you might see your range drop a little bit, and that's because it's factoring in battery health. Like the age of your battery is part of that calculation now. So hopefully that makes it more accurate, which is neat. So cool. Model Y price cuts. So now the performance model gets the rebate. So that's cool. So now all the Teslas get the rebate, every one of them. And then drop the price of other vehicles as well. So they're very competitive, as we saw when they were compared against the Mach-E. So that's neat. And Raymond, that's it for me. I'm done.
Just want to mention that the Teslas, it's the 3s and the Ys that are all right. The S and the X are still not eligible for the rebate.
Yes.
So anyways, yeah, so if you're not signed up as a member, we encourage you to sign up as a member. Through PayPal, it's right on our website, the homepage membership, I think it says. And then the other slide, if I can get it to move. There we go. We're at 86, actually. I checked earlier today. We're at 86 subscribers, so go and subscribe, okay? So all of our meetings are on there. And there's a few other stuff in there that we put that are from various events and things of that nature. So, and that's it. That's it.
Steve has a question.
Quick question for you, Mike. Good presentation.
Thanks.
You mentioned Stellantis is not on board with Tesla. To me, that's counterintuitive. Why would they do that?
Okay, can I explain that? So if you look at right now, the way that you would use a Magic Dock, okay?
Yeah.
Tesla doesn't care which car you're using, right? You use a Tesla app to enable it, okay?
Yeah, right.
So if Stellantis wanted to do like Ford, where the Ford app itself will do the authentication and start the charging station as such and all that, right? If they wanted to do that, they would need an agreement with Tesla to be able to integrate it, right? They haven't done that. It doesn't mean that they won't, that Stellantis cars won't be able to use
They'll be
superchargers.
able to use superchargers with the Magic Dock, but they won't be able to use superchargers natively.
No, but they should
No,
be
they will
able
be
to,
able-
but they'll have to use the app. They'll have
They'll have
to
to use the Tesla app.
Okay.
So they won't be able to use the Stellantis app. They won't be able, they'll have to
Right.
use the Tesla app, whereas
Yeah.
Ford users will be able to use the Ford app and
And
won't have
probably have
to,
plug-in charge and stuff too.
and won't have to use the Tesla app. So that's the only difference between Stellantis and Ford, is whose app do you get to use?
Just before we get to the roundtable, two things. One, Kristen is doing a EVCO calendar. So submit your picks. Go to the website. We have a page coming up soon, hopefully, where you can submit your picks for EVs. I don't know if Kristen wants to talk about this a little bit or if that pretty much covers it. But just so you guys know, take pretty pictures of your cars, submit them, and maybe they'll be on the calendar.
They have to be your car, no people in it.
Yes, your car, no people, and no children because privacy and stuff. The other thing is if you're watching us live, you can hang out for the roundtable. If you're watching us on YouTube, this is where your video ends. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month.